ago, trees were a large part of our lives. We woke up in the trees. We went to sleep in the trees. We laughed, cried, ate, slept, made love, and did everything that a human does, but in the trees. Trees were such an integral part of our lives that we would never have been able to think anything but tree while we were living so close to trees. It is unfortunate that we have moved away from trees because now they no longer occupy our minds, our hearts, and our souls in the same way. Now they are a spectacle. We are no longer a part of what the earth is. Remember that we belong to the earth. The earth never belongs to us. And all that we have, we must borrow and not believe we should take. When we begin to see the earth as a possession of ours, as something we've got to keep and look after, the problem with this is that no matter how far-thinking we are, we start to make judgments on what the earth should do, rather than it being the other way around. If the earth sees us as family members, and if we see earth as a grandmother, then we see ourselves more or less as children, as those who need guidance. It's really like giving a 2-year-old the keys to the family home and telling that toddler to look after the home, to make decisions on its maintenance, which it wouldn't be possible to do. So can a baby be responsible for the earth and the natural world? Can 7.9 billion babies, currently the population figure of the world, be in charge of something that should never have been reduced to such a status? The fact is, it took 2 billion years to reach 1 billion people on Earth, and just 200 years to reach 7.9 billion people. So we, in our current infinite wisdom within our selfie age, end up stylizing our world, glamorizing our world, reinventing our world, probably over and over again. We don't really know what else to do. As babies who haven't grown up, we'd rather be sitting in our playpens, playing with our toys. Isn't that, though, what we're trying to do with the natural world? The bottom line is that we just haven't grown up. We haven't matured. As one of my wise ancestors would say, we haven't been initiated into adulthood. And the natural world can do precious little about it. The natural world hasn't changed over thousands of years. It's we who changed. We who believed we must develop and grow and evolve into something better. The natural world has done nothing wrong. What are we doing? So we have to try to think tree. That's a very, very difficult thing to do today. Because where we stand in our understanding of the word nature, which, by the way, never existed in many languages, especially in the Romany language. So nature, what is that? It isn't separate. Nature to mean what's outside when we want to go and visit a wood or a forest. That is very, very new in terms of our timeline. We can only use our imagination to try to think tree. So we're no longer guided by the wise, insightful, ancient grandparent we once had. We see images where we once saw life. We see static, lifeless images. Images that haunt us, torment us, because we ourselves have to become an image on a screen. All is now reduced to an image on a screen. Sadly, the natural world has become a computer screen. We have been robbed of life by computer screens, in the sense that we no longer relate to life within the trees and within ourselves. We are being conditioned by screens. Also, we have developed these modern ideas about nature that we like to feast off it. If you go back a long time, I guarantee that our ancestors didn't walk about thinking, this is a beautiful view, this view of the forest, this view of the landscape, this view of the mountains and the sea. We'll have a walk here. They walked with the presence of all of that within them. So they didn't have to somehow externalize it and make it so that they were able to feast off it when they needed a break from whatever else they were doing. They were part of it, part of that sacredness, part of that beauty. And that's something else that's difficult to get your mind around. I understand that. We need to stop seeing the natural world as a leisure activity. We want it to fill us up. Yes, of course, we do need that today. But if we get it in perspective, we can actually walk out into the forest or into the trees, woods, wherever we like to go. And we can maybe lessen that intensity within us, that need that we've got to have this because our lives are so awful. We've got to de-intensify ourselves. I've seen so many people relating so intensely to the trees, and most of this comes out of New Age mind, body, spirit thinking, and they keep having to feed all their intense needs into the trees, load them onto the trees. That's not what we need to be doing. We've got to tame everything down. We've got to think as our ancestors thought. Yeah, that's the way you think tree. By being as the trees are, by thinking as a tree is. Get into some kind of meditative state, stimulate imagination so that we can understand how it used to be when trees covered the earth, when trees were here before we were, when trees knew everything there was to know compared to what a human knows. It's not going to be something that we can develop overnight. We have to work at it. And we have to realize that what the human being is composed of in these times isn't what we were composed of way back when our ancestors walked the earth. I like to put over in all my work, in my books, particularly in Coming Home to the Trees, which you may have read. If you haven't, I would urge you to have a look at this book and to sit with it, think with it, understand where I'm coming from when I'm talking about the nature of trees. Give yourself an opportunity, at least, to open your mind, become neutral. Make it your task to tell yourself that you no longer think as your ancestors thought. If you can deliver this message that you do not know everything, that you in fact know nothing. Remember what I've said before about humility. Be humble. Have this attitude that you want to learn. You don't know everything. That is where the trees are. That is where you will discover tree language. Don't go out there and hug trees. That's a political movement that was started a long time ago, and it turned into a New Age activity. You wouldn't go up to a stranger and hug them. I think I might have mentioned this in one of my books somewhere. See the trees as something you've never seen before, as if a really wise alien has landed on the earth and you've never seen a tree before. How would you approach that tree? What would you wish to ask that tree? If you have a sense that that tree is there as a primeval being, as a amazingly wise and insightful being, if you see that tree as that, then ask to learn to have a little bit of what it has, to think as it thinks. Our ancestors thought tree. They could not do anything else. That was the way they were. That was the way their own ancestors were thousands of years before them. Flip the time scale on, and we are no longer walking with trees. We are walking with an image of a tree. And you could say that we are actually unrecognizable to our ancestors. We have changed so much, and considering ancestors of earlier times remain the same for thousands and thousands of years, it's quite shocking. If they were looking on at us, and I'm sure they are a lot of the time, they must be in a severe state of shock looking at the way their descendants have become. I like to try and imagine what a landscape I'm looking at would have looked like if the trees were still there. Imagine a great city where all you see is buildings and dwellings. Imagine what that would be like if the trees were still there. Imagine factories not being there and trees being there where they once stood. The earth will always try to reclaim what it used to have, where it used to be. It will try to reclaim spaces and places for the trees. And we can help by visualizing that as much as we can. Yes, we may need to use technology, screens to help us do this. But if we can revert back to thinking just a little bit tree, we will be doing ourselves a huge, huge service. And we will be doing, most of all, our ancestors a huge service. So when you're spending time in the trees, please don't be tempted to do this. Or even this: please don't make fun of the trees. That's not what they need. Just be natural. Take your thoughts, your feelings, just as your ancient cousins might have done, and just relate to the trees in a natural way. Try as much as you can to be a little more neutral and natural in your approach to them. Tree planting stems from the farming principle, and we have to ask, how many pre-farming, ancient and primitive hunter-gatherer tribes would plant trees? The answer, none. Did Romany Gypsy people plant trees? Of course we didn't. We wouldn't take such a thing into our own hands. I've often contested the idea of planting trees. I don't know whether it's right to take nature's intentions into our own hands. After all, if it can take a day or just a few hours to fell a tree, and it can take thousands of years or at least hundreds of years for that tree to grow and flourish again, do we have the right to dictate how these trees want to live and grow themselves? We've done the damage. We've committed the crime. Now we have to allow the natural world to do what she's always done for thousands of years in her own way. Trees will seed themselves if we allow them to. Isn't a natural world created by trees themselves better than a natural world created by man who has to plant the trees? It may take hundreds of years to return to any kind of normality again, but so be it. She is not here for us. We're here for her. Remember that we're derivatives of Earth. We're like all other creatures on Earth. We are the same as them and they are the same as us. But the trees, the Earth, the natural world is something very different. Oh my goodness, there's a lot we need to learn. And I fear for the trees, as you may also do. They are fast disappearing all over the world, and they are the most beautiful, sacred, wonderful beings we could ever have around us. They are not vain, they are not stupid. What do they have? What is it they have that keeps them ticking over, growing, dying, being what they are, all in the same way, year after year, generation after generation, millennia after millennia? What is it that they've got that we lost? We once had that. We need to try as much as we can to find it once again. We must at all costs follow the laws made by the trees rather than the laws made by humans. We might ask when we see eyes, ears, hearts, hands and hair, etc. upon trees, are trees shaped like us, or are we shaped like them? Many primitive cultures believe we originated from trees, and the nomadic gypsy of the distant past would agree. When we look at the eye within the bark of a tree, we are assured that we are looking at an ancestor, and that should give us the deepest thrill. It should move us to great depths when we realise that we're looking into the eye of an ancestor who might be all of 400 million years old. When seeing trees as people, we might not find it so easy to see people as trees. And we might realise just how little we understand them when thinking about this. We need to visit and revisit woodlands again and again so that we acquire the qualities of those wise ancestors. If we wish to model ourselves upon trees, we will be doing quite well if we become just a tiny bit as wise as they are.